Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is Captain Randy Wright speaking, and as always, I'm joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seat belts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while Jeremy and I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, because there really is a lot of news and information to get to before we may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, what can we say now that we've gotten out of Super Saturday? You know, the second largest election contest that we've had so far in this 2016 election cycle. Well, one thing that we can say for certain is that there is a clear media bias with respect to how this has been covered. And what I'm really speaking to here is what we saw with Fox News. Truly, they had a bias, a strong media bias against Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Some of the things that we noticed was, first of all, Fox News Channel was slow to call victories for Cruz. Many of the commentators and pundits kept saying it was too early. I'm sure you remember, Jeremy, with Maine, they waited until the gutless opposition party, or GOP, actually came out and called it for Cruz. However, if you juxtapose that with what happened in Louisiana, they called it for Trump with less than 1% of the vote in. Of course, they were later forced to withdraw the claim of victory and then to call it a tie or a draw. But, it's this sort of media bias that I really think disenfranchises a lot of voters and drives a lot of voters nuts and, makes them conclude that the system is corrupt.
I don't get it. I really don't. It's Louisiana had something like 8 precincts in, and just like that. Oh, I went for Trump. And then Little Orphan Yap Yap. Little Orphan Annie.
Yeah, we've got more on her.
Toto.
Yeah.
Give a dog a bone. What? Tweets. Sends out a tweet. Trump killed in Louisiana. Really? He did? He did. So at the end of the day, ultimately there was a tie between Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus and Texas Senator Ted Cruz as far as delegates goes. But Trump killed in Louisiana.
Well, yeah. I mean, he killed so much that he wound up tying. So that's a great win, isn't it? Killing it like Little Orphan Annie there. But we'll get more on to Annie as this goes on, because she really did say a fair number of stupid things. But
I want to look at Kentucky when the Super Saturday started at the beginning of the night. Cruz was behind something like, I don't know, 15, 20 points, somewhere in there behind Trump. And at the end of the night, it was less than 4%. Less than 4%. If anything is killing it, that is killing it. It's called closing the gap. Yeah. And that is what Trump or Cruz has done consistently. He was the underdog coming into this whole election cycle, and he's done nothing but consistently increase his lead, his gain, his support.
And, that's something that they said that he couldn't do from the very beginning. The entire mainstream media, all of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have said that he wouldn't ever be able to do it, that he would never be able to pull a victory out. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Cruz has shown that he is a consistent, principled conservative, that he has stood up for all of these things ever since he first entered his career as not only an attorney, but also as the Solicitor General for the state of Texas, where he stood up before the Supreme Court more times than any other licensed Texas attorney and argued in protection of our fundamental and unalienable rights. But, Trump comes out here and tries to say that that's not an accomplishment. Really? his lawyers are better than Trump's lawyers ever were, and his lawyer was him. Him meaning Ted Cruz. That's something that just is a disconnect with a lot of the way that this is presented to the public. And again, it goes right down the line of the media bias that we've been seeing time and again. Ever since Trump first threw his hat in the ring and officially announced that he was running for the highest office in the land, the press has been ogling over themselves just to give him free airtime. It is beyond preposterous. But you know, Jeremy, it just goes to show that there is something more to what the media is attempting to do here, and we definitely will be fleshing that out a little bit later in a later segment in the show. But right now, I just want to touch on what we saw with Fox News. Let's look at how the hosts of Fox's The Five, you know, the program that replaced Glenn Beck's program with the five hosts. First, we see that Eric Bolling came out and claimed that isn't it refreshing to have Trump hold consistently inconsistent positions, as if this is some marvelous or miraculous thing to have happen in politics, as if that isn't what drives voters and the popular sovereigns nuts.
Did Eric Bolling forget the whole Iraq war debacle with the Democrats? Well, I was for it before I was against it. I was for it before I was against it. I was against it before I was for it. Let's do this so we can see what's in it. Hey, it's the same crap. The absolute same crap. It's just combed a different way.
Well, you know, it also goes down the lines of, I'm sure you recall back in 2006 when the Democrats took control of the House and Senate again, and Nancy Pelosi went out in front of the cameras of the salivating mainstream media and said that at last the culture of corruption was over. That's so laughable because they are the party of corruption. They absolutely are. But the detente wing of the gutless opposition party is a close second in that respect. And so we see that they were just absolutely lying about this yet again. And then, you know, you wonder about the culture of corruption. Everybody says they're tired of the corruptions in politics. They're tired of the so-called establishment wing in politics. So then to voice their anger, they're going to go run out and vote for the guy who's funded it for 30 plus years? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Trump is the linchpin between the Democrats and the Republicans as far as where the corruption goes. He's the linchpin. And if anybody says otherwise, they're not paying attention, because he has even come out and admitted it, that he has funded both sides. I've given money to the Democrats. I've given money to the
Isn't that bribery?
Well, yes. Yes, it is.
The way that he's doing it, because if you go back to when he was in the process of building Trump Tower, he was greasing the palms of prominent New York politicians so that he could violate New York, basically health and safety codes, building codes, to use that Polish brigade to illegally demolish the old Beaufort building, I believe it was called, that was standing on the site before. If it's not that, it's something very similar to that, Boward or Beaufort or something. Anyway, these Polish illegal aliens, which I know little orphan Annie Yap Yap Toto was trying to say, yep, you're anti-white if you're trying to point that out. Yep, they have high IQs. Button it, Annie. Button it, or we're going to go rub your nose in it in the corner. The thing is, their IQs don't matter. They were here illegally. They were forced to tear down a building without proper equipment. They were stripping live hot electric wires with their bare hands, and Trump had made false promises that he would, save and preserve the historically significant friezes that were on that building, because it literally was considered a New York landmark. That was another law that he kind of worked his way around, and he lied about it. He tore it down. When he learned how expensive it was, he just said, chisel it. And that's exactly what he would do to our shared Constitution and our fundamental and unalienable rights. Mark my words, folks, that is just the type of charlatan, conman, and snake oil salesman that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus really is.
Well, again, I made mention that he's been very forthright with this. He everybody is all caught up in the hype and being mesmerized by the follicle fray, that it's just they don't see what's going on. Back in the 1930s, the citizens of Germany fell prey to the exact same tactics. Hitler, in so much as he came right out and said, I'm going to be a dictator, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to do it because you deserve this, because you have to take up the reins for this. He put power in the hands of the people so that they could turn right around and give it right back to him willingly and voluntarily, so that they had no reason or recourse to complain about it. That is what Trump is doing.
Yeah,
that's exactly what he's doing. We see it with him having people escorted out of his rallies because they speak out against him, which, guess what, would be no different than Adolf Hitler just having, the Waffen SS pull out their Lugers,
the brown shirts.
The brown shirts pull out their Lugers and just execute somebody right there on the spot. I mean, it'd be no different. Hey, Trump doesn't have a problem shooting people. He said so himself. He wouldn't lose any votes.
And we'll get to something on that in another segment in the show. Folks, this show really is jam-packed. Next, going back to this kind of media bias, particularly with respect to the Fox News channel, Kimberly Guilfoyle, the divorced lawyer, continues to lambast Cruz for the phony Carson scandal from Iowa. She said that if she were Carson, she would not endorse Cruz. Well, Kimberly Guilfoyle, if I were you, I wouldn't wear so much makeup. But that's neither here nor there. Why are you making these points that aren't even substantiated? It has been shown time and again that the Carson thing was actually started by CNN, and it was actually peddled by some of Carson's own people, whom he's even come out and said that maybe his entire campaign has been a sham. And so he finally dropped out. I mean, good for him. I would have done it sooner. But apparently he was doing this to keep the bills paid because of the way that the con men who ran his campaign were doing things. And so we see that there's clearly this stacked impetus or this stacked opinion against Cruz by most of the pundits on Fox News. And that's why I am, unabashedly throwing them into the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. They do the same type of hyperbole. They do the same type of uncorroborated news stories where they just repeat a lie time and time again, taking it straight out of the book of Joseph Goebbels' Principles of Propaganda. I mean, that's literally what this is. But to make matters worse, it's also coming straight out of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. You see, the mudflinging that Little Orphan Annie Yap Yap Toto and Jerry Rivers and Donaldus himself are doing, they're trying to personify everything that is vile and wicked and wrong with the country, and they're flinging it at Cruz. And what they're hoping for, where Alinsky and Goebbels would disagree, is on the boomerang part. Alinsky said you just fling so much crap out there that it doesn't matter whether some of it boomerangs back. Your opponents are just going to be swamped with it and not be able to focus on one thing. And that's absolutely the style of campaign tactics that we have seen exuded by the Trump camp. But it doesn't just stop there. The media is a prancing lapdog just with all of this, perpetuating it, doubling down on it. I mean, we've even seen Lou Dobbs come out and and hashtag on Twitter, "Make America Great Again," as though he is a lapdog for Trump.
Yeah, and, another disappointment is Rush Limbaugh as well. I mean, these recent statements that he made about, Trump is the one that can make America great again. I'm so sick and tired of hearing that slogan, "Make America Great Again." Why is it so hard for people to comprehend that America is already great?
It never stopped being great.
It never stopped being great. It will never stop being great. See, when you say make something great, that means that it has to have not been great to begin with.
And then to even emphasize that with again.
Yeah. It's kind of like, taking somebody, slashing them up with, real thin sheets of paper, giving them a whole bunch of paper cuts, and then dumping a whole bunch of salt in their wounds. That's exactly what it is. They are insulting and assaulting the integrity and the principles of the United States and the people, the sovereigns.
And you know what's interesting is if you juxtapose this to the original slogan that he stole this from, "Make America Great Again" was actually a part of a slogan from Reagan. But what his said is, "Let us make America great again." In other words, what that was insinuating was, America was still great, but it could be better. Let us make it even greater. That it was different. It's that let us, meaning us together, we the people, let us do it. Whereas Trump's just says, "Make America Great Again." It's as though I decree, I edict, I hand down from Mount Sinai that that America will be great again if you elect me. It's always I, me, me, me. It's never any substance. And, when you looked at the debate that took place in Detroit, Trump, once again, when pressed for specifics, for specific policies, and when it was shown on that split screen in the Fox Theater in Detroit, his consistently inconsistent statements, he once again just provided these empty, hollow, meaningless platitudes time and again, instead of providing anything of real substance. And what that comes down to is he just has no substantive arguments to make.
Well, he keeps saying, "Look, I'm a great leader." And people just ask people know, I know it, you know it, I'm a great leader. What he's doing, it's used car salesman doublespeak is what he's doing. That's business talk for, I'm going to give you an idea, but just so you know that I gave you the idea, I'm going to let you run with it, but I'm going to take full credit for it. So that I'm going to make it to where you think that you feel you're the one who came up with the idea and you're the one that goes home happy. Yeah. It's crap. It's total crap. That's all it is. And as our first air marshal would say, he's a used something else salesman with a mouthful of samples. That's all he is.
Yeah.
That's all he is.
Yeah. And, it's we see that the media absolutely enables him to do this with their bias. Sure. And it's really, really annoying. And part of it is that every time they speak of Cruz on the 5 or on most of the time on Greta Van Susteren and particularly on Chris Wallace's Fox News Sunday, which is just proof that the apple doesn't rot far from the tree with Mike Wallace and Chris Wallace there. Mm-hmm. They present Cruz in a negative light, and just a horrific negative light. But, Jeremy, looking back at the Super Saturday results, I'm sure that you were struck just as much as I was with respect to one particular Fox News pundit in general, or in particular, rather. And that was Judge Jeanine Pirro, who she was just awful in her coverage after the results. She she launched into this tirade against voters who refused to support Trump. It was absolutely staggering to see. And part of what she said is she claimed that the Republican Party had to unite behind Trump. Why? Why? And then she accused those who didn't support Trump as being blind, as if that's not laughable. But you know, Jeremy, I'm sure you're going to love this next part. She failed to mention her deep connections with Trump. Mainly that her ex-husband was Trump's personal attorney on retainer for Trump at all times. Yeah.
Interesting.
And
the
while
plot thickens.
Oh, it does. Now, in fairness to her, because we are fair and reasonable people here at the Wright Flyer and Radio Aviation Excellence, she did state it on one episode. And only on one episode, and then never repeated it again. So I think with this in mind, that her attorney that her ex-husband was Trump's former attorney, or still probably his attorney. I don't know what the story is on that, other than that for the longest amount of time, her livelihood depended partially on Trump.
Yeah.
And so I think that makes any and everything that she says about the 2016 election cycle suspect, because she is not, disinterested at all. She is very interested in his campaign, and just the sorts of drivels and diatribes that she's gone off on, and those tangents that she's gone off on her program, it's disgusting.
Well, I would say it's a little bit more than suspect. Here she is, a lawyer, a judge, former judge, who I've watched her show numerous times, and she's had segments on where she spoke about the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is, always there. It has to be followed, this, and this. But when she makes statements and attacks individual citizens and makes remarks against them because they don't want to get behind and support Trump. Miss Pirro, the United States Constitution has 5, count them, 5 amendments pertaining to the person's right to vote. If an individual wants to vote for someone other than Trump, that is their constitutional right. You may not agree with it, but when you want to attack them on it, and you want to make the statements that you do that call people blind, are you really truly standing up for the Constitution and supporting it?
No.
You're not. You know what that makes you? That makes you a hypocrite. It makes you a fraud.
It makes her a charlatan, because she goes out there and, as you say, plays lip service to the Constitution,
Sure.
And then turns around and supports a candidate who doesn't mention word one about the Constitution. And we all know the reason that he doesn't mention word one about the Constitution is it even fits the media narrative. It's that he doesn't follow any rules. He doesn't follow any rules. I think he can comprehend it. It's that he doesn't want to. It's worse than that. He can comprehend it. He absolutely can. But he doesn't want to, because he doesn't believe that rules apply to him. He believes that he is above the fray. He absolutely falls into this category of the elitist that the voters claim to be upset with. They don't even realize that he's condescending to them. Think back to his victory speech in New Hampshire, when he said that I love the poorly educated. Who says that? Who says that? Unless you're going to laugh at somebody. That's like saying, I love stupid idiots. Stupid morons are my favorite people. Why? Because I can dupe them. And that's exactly what it comes down to with respect to Trump. It's that he does look down on the American electorate. He looks upon them as pawns to be used in his political game of self-aggrandizement. And just think, he's got a very well and clearly established pattern with respect to this. You go back to his building of Trump Tower, he ignored the laws. You go back to his bankruptcies, where he violated federal bankruptcy law. He ignored the law. He thinks that he can buy us all off, and he thinks also that his name recognition and the power of his name will allow him to go through and be something greater than the rest of us, which is absolutely why we cannot allow him to become our next commander-in-chief.
Well, you can look at the Trump Hotel down in Florida, too. Same thing. He had illegals help build that.
And he staffed it with illegals.
And see, here's the biggest, one of the biggest examples of all. Obamacare, I'm going to repeal it and replace it. Well, who's going to pay for it? The government's going to pay for it.
That means you and me. That means the taxpayer.
Yeah, exactly my point, because first of all, you could repeal it. Okay. I've always contested that you cannot repeal something that cannot legally exist to begin with. That's my stance on Obamacare. It has no constitutional standing.
The only reason I would say to repeal it is because there is precedent on the book. If you don't repeal it, then they're going to point to that and call it valid law because of the long entrenched traditions of it. Doesn't make it right. It just means that we want to deny them any avenue. But that's not the way Trump's approaching it. And let's look at that laughable statement of his that people would be dying on the street. You know, the Emergency Medical Authorization and Treatment Act, EMTALA, I believe that was its name, something along that line, but its acronym is EMTALA. The other is COBRA. Basically forbids, since the 1980s when it was enacted, any emergency room in the United States of America from turning away any indigent or low-income person who has no ability to pay for life-saving, stabilizing treatment from the emergency room. They cannot be sent away. They cannot be turned away. They must be treated. Now, that killed a bunch of rural hospitals, small rural hospitals that best served little communities, meaning that more people were actually exposed to risk in dying. But those laws are already in the book. So if somebody is dying on the street, it's because they chose not to go to the emergency room. So you see, Trump is once again throwing out these radical and extremist left-wing lies and trying to pass that off. He even said to the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that this isn't a very Republican thing to say, but he has a feeling that most Republicans are compassionate. Once again, falling into this George W. Bush lie that somehow conservatism isn't compassionate unless you temper it with Fabian socialism. Spare me the malarkey and nonsense.
And going back to the whole second part of the example, where after he repeals it, he's going to replace it. Replace it with what? Because see,
universal health care.
Here's a very simple thing, folks. And I dare any lawyer to tell me I'm wrong on this. The United States government has no constitutional authority to enact any healthcare legislation whatsoever. It is not under the purview of their delegated authorities and powers under Article 1, Section 8, or Article 2. Period.
Well, where they'll try and weasel into it is the General Welfare Clause. But the problem is, when you look at the General Welfare Clause in Article 1, Section 8, it is not a prescribing power. It is not an expansive, authoritative power. Rather, it's an explanatory clause. Much like the well-regulated militia part of the Second Amendment is an explanatory clause. Our founding fathers included that sort of thing in it so that you would understand the justification for why they were doing what they would do. In other words, that follows the natural flow of logic, the natural order of things, in other words, the natural law. And that's absolutely what our entire system is based off of. And the fact that you have these historical revisionists, the Fabian socialists that have basically entrenched in our institutions of education throughout this country, and you also have people like Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpists that keep repeating a lie so frequently that they think they're going to hoodwink you with it, make it the truth. Well, we're throwing that boomerang back, because the truth is what they are arguing is not within the confines of the law. It is something that is extraordinarily outside the bounds of it, something that is diametrically opposed to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the Constitution. But that doesn't matter to them because of the image that they embrace wholeheartedly that is absolutely extra-constitutional.
And again, that's the point. They want to add things in there and construe parts of the Constitution in order to get their agenda fixed. Well, you can't do that, because in doing that, you are encroaching and infringing upon the rights of the sovereign citizens. That's a no-no. In fact, it's a felony to do so, an absolute felony to do so. You cannot do it. But again, this goes right along with the motif and the modus operandi of Trump, who thinks he can do whatever he wants because he's Trump. He even said it, when I tell somebody to do something, if I tell them to do it, they're going to do it.
What a fascist. He really is.
What a fascist. I mean, seriously. First of all, fascism is diametrically opposed to the Constitution, and to support fascism or communism or socialism
is to declare war on everything that the United States represents and stands for.
It's a felony.
Yeah.
There's laws. These laws were made back during the blackballing and the blacklisting of conservatives or even individuals when the American Socialist Party came about, because you had individuals in Hollywood that were actually socialists, admitted socialists and communists, but they couldn't get into films or anything. Maybe it's vice versa. It doesn't matter. The fact is, these laws came about because of situations like that. They wanted people to understand that if you are a United States citizen, you have allegiance to the United States, period.
And you know, one of the
anything contrary, it goes against that.
And you know, one of the things to point out with respect to Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpist when he's at his supposed mega rallies that he has is you've seen a lot of times when the hecklers are there, he'll point at them and say, don't let them have their coat or take away their property or besmirch and belittle them at any given opportunity. And what that comes down to is he's trying to do three things. He's trying to accomplish the dehumanization of his rivals. And he's trying to project the anger of the people, whip the anger up in the room to a fever pitch so that they don't understand what they're doing exactly, and so that it becomes this groupthink. It's basically a type of group hypnosis. And he gets this from his third thing, which is when you whip them up into that, it makes your popularity, at least temporarily, soar. And as we recall, his ex-wife, Ivana Trump, said back in the 1990s that he kept a book of Hitler's speeches next to his bed. And literally what that was for was so he was studying the magnetism of Hitler. And Hitler was actually coached in this by a stage performer. How to whip an audience up, right down to the exaggerated hand gestures that he was infamous for. Trump does the same thing. He's not as eloquent about it as Hitler, although Hitler really was not elegant or eloquent. He was very calculating in how he would deliver it and in his cadence, and he made sure that there was a rhythm to everything that he was saying, and that would allow him to just claim that he was ripping himself open, exposing himself as if his heart was naked to the audience, but it literally just would go over the audience like a wave, like a tidal wave. And that's what Trump is trying to do. The problem is, if you've studied it, and if you know the historical aspects of what they're doing, and one of the things that Hitler always repeated is never mention specifics. Always approach the abstract and the raw emotionalism of it. That's what Trump does, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's in one of his huge town hall meetings. It's always whipping up fervor, getting everything to a fever pitch so then he can sell his excrement.
Sure. And I believe it was, in Florida last week, where he had this rally and he told everybody, raise your right hand.
Yeah, it was in Orlando.
In Orlando. Tell everybody, raise your right hand. And then, so they did, like good little, goose steppers.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, repeat after me. And he made them take an oath.
An oath of loyalty to him.
An oath of loyalty to him. The last time any individual who wanted to portray themselves as a leader or gain the favor of the people in attendance at a rally, Adolf Hitler did that every single time. And people just, they put their hand right up. I'm beginning to think and come to the realization that, Trump, he made the comment he's aligning himself with the evangelicals. They're all flocking to him. He's taking more evangelical votes. You're nowhere close to true evangelism, Trump. You're nowhere close to it. What you are at best is maybe a Joel Osteen with a better hairdo. That's about it.
I would say it's a better hairdo.
That's it. That's the extent of it.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you're basically getting your congregation, so to speak, to bend at every whim and word that you speak. And they do it because you've mesmerized them into doing it. Now, here's the thing. This isn't an attack on your supporters, Mr. Trump, by no stretch of the imagination. Because, see, people are stupid. People are stupid. People will believe a lie, A, if they want it to be true, or B, if they're afraid it's true.
And I wouldn't even go so far as to say they're being stupid. They are just in such an emotional outrage because of the state of things that are happening in the not just the economy, but throughout the country. Politically speaking, the gutless opposition party, particularly with Benedict Arnold, Paul Ryan, giving Obama just everything, which is a continuation of what John Boehner did. Of course, the people are outraged. They're frustrated with the state of things in this country, and that is, the perfect atmosphere for a charlatan, a fascist dictator type to rise up, because it's that type of fear atmosphere that's fertile for it. And it's more than fear. It's more than fear. It's outrage. Outrage. I mean, when you reach that point of being so irate, they say that blood fills your eyes. It means that you can't see, you can't think straight. That's when you can be manipulated. And that is what Donaldus Julius Caesar Trump is banking on. He is hoping that his followers are just going to be worked up to such a tizzy that they're not going to understand what's going on, or that he is leading them astray. They're just going to hear all of the shallow, empty, meaningless platitudes, and that's going to make them feel good. And you can see it right into just the simplistic nature of let's make America great again.
Yeah, bread and circuses. That's all it is. Bread and circuses. And see, his supporters, you know what? Bless their hearts. If they want to support him, fine. That's up to them. That's their right. That is their choice. It is their freedom to do so. But freedoms and liberties and rights do not come free. There is a price that's going to have to be paid. That's all there is to it. Just like there's a price that it has to be paid for you and I for supporting Ted Cruz. And should Ted Cruz become the nominee and get elected president, there's still going to be a price to pay. That price the pay is going to be, we're going to have to grab ourselves by the bootstraps. We're going to have to take even more personal responsibility to ensure that our rights are not violated by anybody. And it's going to be our obligation and duty to continue to educate individuals on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the price to pay. It's called perseverance. It's called
duty and self-accountability and responsibility.
And the price that individuals that are supporting Trump or Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or even Rubio and Kasich, that responsibility or that price is actually a higher price than what we would have to pay, because that means they're going to have to work harder. They're going to have to work longer. They're going to have to educate themselves that much more. And it's going to be very difficult for them to come away from that blindness that has overtaken them. That is a bigger price that they're going to have to pay. They have to do all of that before they can reach that sense of enlightenment, so to speak, of having an understanding of what it is to be dutiful to your country and maintaining and preserving and protecting your freedoms for you and your family.
Right. Right. And, going back to kind of this media theme that we're focusing on tonight's episode, we've already talked about how there is this undeniable bias on the part of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. Here's a story I bet that most of you have not heard, but it's something that Jeremy and I have reiterated time and again on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, and that is this. It comes out of New York, and what it says is that Judge David A. Weinstein dismissed a petition which contended that Ted Cruz was not eligible to run for president as he was not a natural-born citizen, or is not a natural-born citizen. That same craptastic argument that we hear re-uttered by Trump and little orphan Annie Yep Toto time and again. Well, as I and Jeremy both have stated on previous episodes, the judge dismissed the case on justiciability grounds. In other words, the petitioners didn't have standing to bring the claim. This is because, once again, of the political question doctrine, which states that courts won't hear a case which is best decided by Congress. This issue has already been addressed by Congress. Any attempts, so if you want to have a change of the law, you're going to have to go have Congress do it. But here's the clincher. Any attempts to change the law wouldn't apply to Cruz, as it would be an ex post facto law and a bill of attainder, both which are prohibited by Article 1, Section 9 of our Constitution.
It never ceases to amaze me that Randy, we've talked about patterns. There's an absolute pattern with Trump in his rantings, his rallies, his Twitter feeds, his little 30-second YouTube videos that he puts up. Excuse me. There's always a pattern with him. There's a pattern with his speech. There's a pattern with his mannerisms, so on and so forth. And that has spilled over into his supporters, to where now they have a pattern of, whenever you address them on a fact, or when you call them out on something, like,
you're a liar, you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm smarter than you.
And I'll give everybody a key example. A key example in this. I came across an individual on Facebook who said, I will never, ever, ever vote for Donald or for Ted Cruz because he is a liar. I may vote for Rubio. I might vote for Kasich. I'll probably going to vote for Trump because he's my man, but I'll never vote for Cruz because he's a liar. So I asked the individual, please, what lie has Ted Cruz told?
They can't tell you.
they can't tell you because there's no lie that exists.
Yeah.
No lie that exists. Okay. Then they come up with the pattern, they revert back to the Carson thing, having dealings with his wife with Goldman Sachs, all this other, stuff that has already been proven to be a false narrative.
Yeah.
And that's all they can do every single time.
Mm-hmm.
But then they start another pattern, the ones that are a little bit more vitriolic and have a little bit more hatred.
They go after
start
you.
making death threats.
Oh yeah.
Some of them. Now we're going to touch on this, but maybe I'll just save it for when we touch about this in the segment.
Yeah.
But individuals have begun to act on these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's sociopathic behavior, folks. When you have no wanton regard for anybody else's freedoms or liberties, because just based on the fact that you disagree with them and you cannot make your point and prove your stance, you resort to ad hominem attacks and death threats. That's sociopathic. It's not healthy.
And, going once again a little bit back to this media theme, with respect to that case, we see that Fox News Channel hasn't covered it. The other usual suspects have remained tight-lipped on the matter as well. As I'm sure you all recall, Ann Coulter and Geraldo Jerry Rivera both claimed that they thought Cruz was disqualified. Despite being licensed attorneys, they purposefully chose to ignore the justiciability issue. Both Jeremy and I have made it clear that it was a non-issue, that this whole birther nonsense, bovine excrement, absolutely has no place in the court systems, and that it would be thrown out for lack of standing, which, by the way, this is yet another case. This isn't the only case where this has happened, and it happened back in 2008. This is because of the way that the law is written and the way that the courts have been acting upon their judicial duties and obligations, that it would be thrown out. So we now know that, once again, these two supposed attorneys were going out and purposefully saying the wrong things so they could score political points, to push their propagandistic narrative and initiative. And so...
Isn't that illegal, Randy, for licensed lawyers to do that?
It is if they are in a representative capacity. They weren't in a representative capacity.
However, it is unethical and immoral.
Yes. So, we here at the Wright Flyer are now demanding that both Little Orphan Annie Coulter and Mr. Rivers, who is probably digging for an empty vault right now, apologize to Cruz. Now, of course, we know they won't because they're charlatans. Mm-hmm. So therefore, we ask that all decent conservatives everywhere make the same demand as we are. Let's make it to where they can't ignore this. Let's bring civility back to this election cycle by going after the frauds who are perpetrating this type of mudslinging that we have seen at unprecedented levels in this 2016 presidential election cycle. Because that is the only way that we're going to draw the madness to a close.
I have a question, Randy, and this just struck me. And I know I keep referring back to Hitler and Goebbels and all the propaganda. Can you imagine what Nazi Germany would have been like had somebody incapacitated Joseph Goebbels? Well, I mean, it's something to ponder and think about. And this is what needs to be done with, these individuals that are spewing this nonsense, making these false claims. behaving in an unethical and immoral fashion, let's take all their ammunition away from them. Let's incapacitate their ability to function in that arena.
You know who probably would have taken over for Goebbels? It would have been the filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl. So if you've ever seen Triumph of the Will, which is just a god-awful film to sit through, she had the same type of propagandistic touch that Goebbels did. She was more visual than Goebbels, but she could have she could have gone off of Goebbels' principles of propaganda and perpetrated the same type of intelligence war that he was waging. I mean, people forget that it was show people that did the Allies' deception campaigns. Think of Ian Fleming. He had a showman's type background. He was a novelist. He was more into writing, but he could just create these fictitious cases, Operation Mincemeat, things like that. Then we had a magician who made everyone think that the invasion of Europe during D-Day would have occurred at the northern port of Calais as opposed to the southern ports of Normandy. And he set up all these fake illusions, fake aircraft, fake tanks, fake boats. They had fake radio traffic. They had General Patton, who was the most respected Allied general among the German high command, come and give repeated speeches, all to convince Hitler and the Nazi top brass that the Americans were going to invade where they did not. And Leni Riefenstahl could have filled that position, but it's still important that we knock out these charlatans. And so we see that there's another story. Wright Scoop has also reported on another sickening trend with respect to the graduates from Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. In the month of February, ABC News, CBS News, and NBC News all devoted more time to Trump than any other candidate. In total, they gave Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus 187 minutes versus 67 minutes of airtime for the Rubester and 62 minutes to Cruz. This means that, respectively, Trump got 50.4%, Narco got 18%, and Cruz got 16.7% of the coverage. In other words, the hairpiece got 3 times the amount of coverage as any other candidate. We here at the Wright Flyer are pointing the finger at the media for this.
Sure. Now, there's something to be said about that as well, though. Cruz has received, of the 3 of them, the least amount of media coverage. But yet, he has been the most consistently growing candidate from day one. Folks, that's what's defined as an underdog. And underdogs will always, if you discount them, they will always come back to haunt you. They will always come back and throw it right in your face. It reminds me of that movie and the story about Rudy. The young man that went to Notre Dame, that all he wanted to do was play football. He was considered to be an underdog. And when he finally got in the game, he got his chance. He did one of the most notorious, miraculous plays and won the game. He was discounted by his family. He was discounted by his friends. He was discounted by the school. And then we finally broke out because he stuck with it. He stayed the course. He kept on pushing and pushed and pushed. He was consistent in his actions. And he finally proved himself. See, Trump started off at the top of the plateau just because he's Trump.
And he stagnated.
He's stagnated. He's dipped a couple of times here and there, but he has never raised above a certain percentage. Ted Cruz started off at the bottom of the pack. And since day one, he's been consistently going up.
He's a cruise missile. What can we say?
Exactly. And he's found his target numerous times. And when he has, that was the end of it. That was it. It was just blew everything right out of the water. Texas, Oklahoma,
Alaska,
Maine,
Kansas,
Maine, Iowa. Look at the straw poll from CPAC. Look at the straw poll from CPAC. Now, we don't put a whole lot of stock and faith in the polls, but straw poll from CPAC is usually an indicator of some sort of how things are going to play out.
Yeah.
And let's also look at endorsements. Randy actually pointed out, and I didn't notice this until he pointed it out to me, that every state where the governor has endorsed Trump, Trump lost delegates to Cruz. Every state. Now,
fascinating, isn't it?
It's, this is why I say, given that trend, that New Jersey is going to go to Cruz. Now, I'm not going to base it completely on that trend. I know that there's individuals in New Jersey, the Cruz crew of New Jersey. You folks are going to make that happen. And you know what? We're going to be right there standing shoulder to shoulder with you here on the Wright Flyer. We've got your back because we believe in the continuance and the furtherance of natural law system and our shared constitution and our rights all being safe and secure because of we the people. Not because Cruz is looking at being some kind of champion for us. Cruz doesn't want to be a champion for anybody. All he wants to do is be the messenger. He places all of the responsibility on we the people where it justly resides from day one. Trump, on the other hand, is, again, I, me. I'm a winner. No, you're not. You are a loser. You know why you're a loser? Because you don't have my support. And unless you have my support, you're a loser. Period.
That's all there is to it. Either.
That's how that works. You're not big enough to be a winner because you cannot convince me to support you because I am diametrically opposed to fascism and wannabe little Napoleon complex potentate dictator wannabes.
Well, he's got a Napoleon complex with his hands, at least. That
Sure.
much. Small hands, stubby hands.
Mm-hmm.
But, the lopsided coverage that we see with this entire election cycle, this is really what drives people mad. But, Jeremy, it does raise some significant questions that I think absolutely need to be addressed. And one of them is why the media would devote so much time to the GOP or to a GOP candidate while they are staunch Fabian socialists. Well, the answer rests in a theory that you and I have spoken of before on past episodes of the Wright Flyer. Mm-hmm. Namely, they are backing the weakest candidate for the RNC. That way, it will be an easy path to victory for whichever Democrat snags the Fabian nomination. More importantly, they are pushing to have Trump work as a wedge to divide conservatives. This will lead to what they hope is a long-term division between the various factions of the Republicans. And there's something important to keep in mind from all of this. Remember that when George Washington was getting ready to leave during his final second term there, he warned the American people not to break into factions, not to get into these heated types of factionalism that could tear a country apart, because through that, they would lose sight of the message and the principles behind our shared Constitution. And it would lead this country to mayhem, carnage, chaos, death, and destruction. And you see that playing out in a microcosm with respect to the gutless opposition party, or GOP. We are at such a point now that we've been divided, but the important thing to keep in mind with the trends, as you've mentioned with respect to this, is when it's an open primary, that's when Trump does well. When all of these left-wing Democrats can cross over the aisle and cast their ballot in the other party. But when it's a closed principle or system, Trump does not perform well.
No. And yeah, you touched on it right there. With the open primaries, the individuals are crossing over to vote for Trump. Why? Because they want so bad for someone to be put up there that aligns with them, and they figure that there's strength in numbers. Now, I've come to the conclusion that the gutless opposition party has a choice to make. See, they hate Donald Trump, but they'd love to hate him. They just flat out hate Ted Cruz. And here's the distinction between the both. They hate Donald Trump because he's coming out and he said, I've given money to them, but I'm going to be doing this, 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 and this. That kind of scares them. It's actually offensive to them because they look at it as, well, you supported us, but now you're turning your back on us. Ted Cruz has never faced them in such a way to where he had to turn his back on them. He's always stayed the course. He's always went against them. He's always bucked the system in the interest of the Constitution and the roots of natural law tenets. He's never subscribed to it. He's never gone along to get along. He's never paid to play. Trump has. And the GOP, in my opinion, their choice that they have to make and what they have to figure out, and I think starting to figure it out, who do they hate more, Donald Trump or Ted Cruz? My guess is they're leaning more towards Donald Trump because he's paid to play. He's helped them out. He's endorsed some of them. He's done this, this, and this, and now he's turned their back on them. Trump always wants to talk about other candidates abandoning their constituents and their states. What Trump has done is Trump has turned his back on the establishment that he's supported in order to do an end run on the establishment to take control of it all. That's what he's doing.
Well, it's because he has no principles or values. Trump has changed in the past 24 years party affiliations, 15 times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back and forth.
So again, he has been consistently inconsistent this entire time, and that's exactly why he cannot be a viable candidate. And it's why all of the recent polls show that he is losing in a head-to-head match against Hillary Clinton, and also in a head-to-head match against Whiteface Boing Me Sanders. So, it's all sorts of horrific problems with him as a candidate. He just is not a viable candidate. But now we need to turn to something that you alluded to a little bit earlier in the program. It's to show that we are consistent in our part and give credit where credit's due. And then we'll get into that part that I really wanted to talk about. Wright Scoop reports that CBS News broke a fascinating story with respect to Donaldus. CBS News reported that Trump likes to claim a 98% satisfaction rating with Trumpus University, or Trumpus U. Mm-hmm. However, CBS went on to report that court documents show over 40% of Trumpus U enrollees received refunds. In addition to this, 150 former Trumpus U students have alleged that the program was a fraud, and there are currently 3 lawsuits having been filed against the Trumpus. What this shows is that Trumpus has lied about Trumpus U. Mm-hmm. Annie Coulter, meanwhile, went yipping off on Twitter to claim that Trumpus U was less fraudulent than law school, pointing to a law student suing her own law school. This makes Annie look pretty bad. No wonder she isn't practicing law. If she is equating a law degree to a fake university, Who in their right mind would hire an attorney who believes such things? But again, has Fox News reported a single thing about this? No.
No.
This just proves that Fox has a cozy relationship with the Donaldas. It also makes me think that the whole brouhaha over Megyn Kelly was political theater, designed to make their blatant bias appear less staggering. None of this should really come as a shock, though. It's sort of a consistent inconsistency that we've come to expect from the Donaldas.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have to go back and point this out when we were talking about Geraldo and Coulter and their statements that they made, especially when, it comes to the standing for this lawsuit of the eligibility of Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Now, this isn't some way. This isn't me trying to bolster myself up or make myself look better, even though I don't even have to say anything to do this in regards to those two imbeciles. But it just needs to be pointed out that, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who does not have a law degree that pointed this out for them. See, when you have an instance where you make a statement that you say that Trump University has more credibility than a law university, and you couple that with the statement of, pushing this birther issue, so on and so forth, all that did for you, little orphan yap yap, was take every ounce of credibility you thought you had and completely turned it into oblivion. It's gone. It's non-existent.
She's prancing off to the sunset of irrelevancy.
It's when individuals like me, and I'm not the sharpest tool in the drawer, but I do know where to find the sharpener, okay? I don't know everything. I've never claimed to know everything. But the fact of the matter is, what I do know is because of what I've studied, because of what other individuals have taught me. And that is a fair amount more, obviously, than what she wants to apply. She's gone to law school. She's had a higher education than I have had. And yet she doesn't want to apply it. Instead, she wants to use her clout, her stature, her public appearance to do what? Push an agenda.
She's a propagandist through and through.
That's exactly what she is. Therefore, she has no credibility whatsoever. So anything that she yaps on about from here on out, I excuse me. I wish, actually, what I'm going to do is just from now on Twitter, I'm just going to put up an image of a rolled up newspaper and just tweet it to her. That's it. That's all that needs to be said. Period.
Yeah. So now we turn to take a moment to send our thoughts and prayers to a pastor of an Idaho church known as the Altar Church, Pastor Tim Remington, who was shot 6 times in the back shortly after praying with Ted Cruz. He has come out of surgery. He is in stable condition, but this is a horrific sort of monstrous behavior that will not be tolerated. And police have identified the attempted murderer as 30-year-old Kyle Odom, who has blonde hair, stands approximately 6 feet tall, and at least as of earlier today, he was still on the run. I don't believe they've apprehended him yet.
I haven't seen anything yet.
Okay, so then he's probably still on the run. So the police also state that he was last seen driving a 2004 silver Honda Accord with Idaho license plate K578519. That's K578519. One more time, K578519. Of course, should you see him, do not approach him, because he's considered both armed and dangerous. Rather, contact 911 or the authorities. And I hope that the police apprehend this piece of excrement and that he suffer the full weight and extent of the law, the consequences therefrom.
Yes.
And, it's interesting to note that the media has basically given this very sparse coverage. And I think what that alludes to is the fact that they consider Cruz's stance and those of the pastor as being insincere. Nothing could be further from the truth. They are absolutely sincere in the message that they convey. And it's just horrific and shocking. But you were the one that pointed out to me that this Kyle Odin creature is actually a Trump supporter.
It's been alluded to that. Now I'm trying to find, and again, it comes down to the media. If a Ted Cruz supporter would have done something like this, the media would be all over it. They would dig and dig and dig, just like they have done with every single incident about a shooting with police officers discharging their weapon in the line of duty justifiably. They've dug into their backgrounds, or whether it was some sociopath like Dylan Ruth, they dug into their background and said, oh, well, he has a Confederate battle flag, that, Southern Cross and blah, blah, blah. But yet, no word on the background of this individual, Kyle Odom, except that he's a former Marine. Now, you know how I am. I'm going to dig on this.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to find out information pertaining to this individual's background. Because because that is the only way that we can have consistency in the media. If the
Joe Newby with the conservativefiringline.com states that yes, he's a former Marine corporal, and worse yet, speculation has arisen that he may be a supporter of frontrunner Donald Trump. There has been no confirmation of that yet, but the DC Gazette said many are claiming that Odom was a supporter of presidential candidate Donald Trump, and he was upset that his pastor led a rally for Cruz, although that has not been officially confirmed. As we reported Sunday, officials said they were not certain if the shooting was connected to Remington's participation in the rally. Some also think the shooting may be related to Remington's work with those addicted to drugs and alcohol. But usually when you have 6 shots in the back, if it's normally a drug or alcohol thing, it's not that type of shooting. To pump 6 shots in somebody's back, that is vitriol.
Well, he was also shot in the head as well.
Was he?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that's clearly more than what most of your gangland junkies, your people that want to stop and peddle crap or take crap from the local stop and rob. This is a bit more than that.
Well, it's more methodical and more planned out. It's premeditated.
Sure.
Absolutely premeditated.
We see from the Washington Post that a photo from his Facebook page shows a blonde man with glasses wearing a dress shirt and top. The page says that Odin is from Coeur d'Alene, served as a corporal in the Marine Corps, and studied biochemistry at the University of Idaho. The police chief, Lee White, told the Spokesman Review that we need to make sure this individual is taken off the streets as quickly as possible. And our thoughts and prayers go to the police to do just that. Members of Remington's church were baffled as to why someone would try and kill their pastor. So he's actually a member of the congregation.
Interesting.
Isn't it always the case with these sociopaths? This going back to our coverage of the Umpqua Community College shooting and some of the various other shootings in the summer of 2015, which was the rampage against guns, the rampage against the Southern Cross battle flag, where they tried to pin everything on an inanimate object for causing this violence. We see a pattern with these people. And it's that people are baffled by it. It seems to come out of nowhere, but there are little telltale signs. Cruz has issued a statement that our prayers are with Pastor Tim, his family, and the doctors who are supervising his care. We pray for his full recovery and are thankful for the efforts of law enforcement to ensure the attacker is swiftly brought to justice. Once again, they are still looking for his 2004 silver Honda Accord.
Mm-hmm.
Do not approach this man, folks.
I'm actually
if you see him and if he's threatening you and you have your firearm, then self-defense. But otherwise, do not go after this guy.
Sure. I'm on his Facebook page right now. And I told you I'm going to start digging. In 2014, he posts on here that he moved to Houston, Texas. And somebody responded on that particular thread, hey, you're living in Texas now. He says, nah, I'm in CDA. So it's just left the University of Idaho in May of 2014, biochemistry. Moved to Moscow, Idaho, so on. So I'm not really seeing a whole lot on this. Now, it could be that he's actually logged into his Facebook page and took a lot of stuff down. You never know. I mean, he is still, on the loose, so to speak. However, he does have something on here from March 2nd regarding John McAfee reveals how to crack the iPhone on live TV. It's some kind of ebombsworld.com report that he put up here. So, I don't know. I mean, it's just, it's very interesting. I'm going to continue to dig on this.
Yeah. It's a shame, but people like this, when you don't respect the fundamental and unalienable rights of your fellow citizens, then that's when you can be adjudicated.
Mm-hmm.
We are all about law and order, but we are also about preserving our fundamental and unalienable rights, and that just goes with this. And so now we come to, you had mentioned Trump is forcing his voters to swear that oath of loyalty to him in Orlando, Florida. Well, did you know that he did it again?
No.
Yes. Donaldus has now forced North Carolina voters to swear an oath of loyalty to him. Once again, Hitler required this of his voters. Mm-hmm. This is the sort of thing that fascists do. We should all be alarmed by this shocking trend. This sort of behavior goes against the fundamental and unalienable rights of the voters who were forced to make this vow. Trump has also forced those who attended one of his rallies in Orlando, Florida, that Jeremy mentioned earlier, to take a similar oath. Taken in consideration with his affinity for fascist dictators and their speeches, there's an undeniable pattern with Trumpists. This reminds me of the whole David Duke controversy. Well, because he denies, but not fully.
Right. Now, how is it that an individual, or why would an individual even, put that towards somebody? I mean, to take an oath, to raise your right hand and to solemnly swear you're,
but not to raise it as a Hitler salute yet. Trump will want that, but not yet.
Well, the thing is, you cannot take an oath to an individual in the United States.
No,
because the United States we're not a statist country. We're not a singular, country. We are a sovereign country, a sovereign republic. We have what's known as individualism. It would be no different than, us having guests on the show here, and when they come onto the show, say, okay, before we get started, we want you to raise your right hand and we want you to swear an oath to us as
that
a
you will
loyal
always
listener.
listen to us. Yes.
That you will always listen to us, that no matter what we say, even if you don't agree with it, you're still going to back us because that's what you need to do. Really? Really? Folks, we will never do that. Ever.
Yeah.
Because we're not dictators.
Yeah. And
we're not fascists.
Jeremy, this sort of behavior and conduct is going to hurt Trump in the long haul.
It better.
And it explains why we could never consider voting for a fraud like this. We couldn't. But why is the media given this so little coverage? Again, this speaks to the desire they have to have the weakest candidate put forward.
Yep.
And during the general election, should Trump somehow nab the nomination, the media would attack him with this. Their attacks would be nonstop, and the voters would turn against him. This also speaks to why Trump really is not a good candidate at all, because the media will just eviscerate him. They will decimate him, and it's going to leave a pathway for one of the Fabians on the extreme left to waltz into the White House so that we have a third term of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. And of course, that's the last thing that this country needs. It truly is the last thing that this country needs.
Well, it's a very simple fact that, as you cited the polls earlier, Trump cannot beat Hillary. Bernie Sanders is not going to be the nominee for the Democrats. Just not going to happen.
With the superdelegates, yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Trump cannot beat Hillary. It is a fact. I don't care what anybody says. It is a fact. Because the thing is, Trump may be calculating. He may be a calculating individual. He is a brash individual. He is a upfront, personal, and right-in-your-face type of individual.
Mm-hmm.
None of that compares or holds a candle to somebody who is more devious, more calculating, and patient. See, Trump is a very impatient individual.
Mm-hmm.
Patience is a virtue. Hillary Clinton is probably, and I said this back in 2008. Actually, I said it in 2009, January of 2009, when she was nominated as Secretary of State. Why would she leave a position of authority as Senator of New York to where she could get votes for her seat at every single election, even long after she's dead? Why would she vacate that kind of authority and take a temporary position as Secretary of State? Because she had aspirations of running for president, and people thought I was nuts. Oh, that'll never happen. And you know what? Now those individuals won't even say boo to me because they knew I was right. And because I don't toe their line, that known as the receding hairline of Trump, I was right about Hillary. I'm right about Ted Cruz. I'm right about Trump, but they don't want to have anything to do with it. And I'm also right about Trump not being able to beat Hillary because Hillary will pull every single stop.
Yeah, the main difference that you're going to see is that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are absolutely going to be in Hillary's corner. They're going to do everything they can to throw anything at Trump, and it will stick due to the nature of how they carry out their attacks. This is what they are planning for. It is why they are salivating to have a chance to get their claws and clutches into the flesh of Trumpus. And Trumpus is such a crybaby that he's going to whine and cry and just, whimper about it the whole way. And he's going to whimper so much that people are going to get sick of him whimpering. It's not, when he said that he was going to win so much that we get sick of him winning so much, he really meant he's going to whine so much that we're going to get sick of his whining. I'm already sick of his whining, and we haven't even gotten into that stage of the campaign yet. So you see, folks, again, this is why we bring all of this to your attention. It is so that you are empowered. Do not take what we're saying at face value, because it's important that you empower yourself. in fact, we want you to be responsible for your own edification with respect to this. And isn't it empowering to know that it is you who has the power to make your own decisions with respect to this? All we ask is that you use the constitutional framework and lens, which is the only litmus test that applies in this crucial election cycle. And make no bones about it, folks. This is a very crucial and pivotal election because we are at a crossroads. We can either choose to embrace the failed policies of this Barack Hussein Obama regime by supporting either a Noid-faced Boy-Me Sanders, a Hillary Rotten Clinton, and yes, a Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpist, or we can choose a principled constitutional conservative. That is up to you, America, and we are putting our faith in you. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright. I've been joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. We want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We invite you to leave any questions, comments, concerns, or what have you, either here on our YouTube page or on our Facebook page or our Google Plus page. Plus, we also invite you to follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle of @RadioAviationX. That's all one words, folks. It's @RadioAviationEX. One more time, it's @RadioAviationEX. And we also have a shop at Cafe Press, which is Shop Wright Flyer Radio, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe that's what it is. If you go onto our Twitter page, you can actually check our departure board. It is a link to it is right there on the departure board, as well as direct links to both Randy and I for our Twitter accounts, and I believe our YouTube channel as well.
Yes. So, folks, thank you again for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We'll see you the next time we take off over the friendly airwaves, leaving you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, unlike any other radio program or venue. Do take care, folks. We will see you next time.